Our objective today is a rigorous close reading of Michael Cantrall's poem, It Was More Than Just a Dream. We will examine its deep structural polysemy and the deliberate ambiguity engineered into its text. We will use the theoretical lens of polysemy, the capacity for a single sign or narrative to hold multiple valid, simultaneous interpretations without internal contradiction. But before we dismantle its architecture, we have to recognize the intended Gothic sublime mood it creates. The poem requires an uninterrupted reading to establish its atmosphere. It was more than just a dream. An immortal here with accusations, and she defends her interpretations. She did see each key. She missed not one sign. When messages arrive, most are asleep. She has been an exception to this truth. The immortal suggests its imagination and infers the visions charmed her own ambition. Shadows chased in the night of a dreamer, a selfish subconscious mind infused with desire. Most see no signs when their answers arrive. Some have been waiting for nothing, and nothing always arrives. It was more than just a dream. This she knows. The emotional resonance at the end of those lines is not accidental. It is a carefully engineered construct, built layer by layer, which we will now systematically dismantle. We begin by isolating the central conflict, an interrogation between a skeptical immortal and a defensive female subject. The author's paratextual tags identify the unstated historical foundation of this text. We are witnessing the theological cross-examination of St. Joan of Arc. Yet Cantrall strips the subject of her identifying name and historical specifics. Erasing the individual identity forces the narrative to function as universal allegory. The interrogator weaponizes psychology against her. He attempts to reframe her divine messages as symptoms of an overactive imagination driven by personal ambition. This pits the subject's unshakable internal spiritual conviction directly against the external, institutional skepticism of the tribunal trying her. By anonymizing Joan of Arc, the text scales beyond 15th century France. The poem becomes a universal exploration of divine revelation, warring against accusations of psychological delusion. To understand the architectural framing of the poem, we have to ask who is actually speaking the lines. We are not hearing the subject or the interrogator directly. Cantrall's own notes on the text clarify the source of this voice. He specifies that the poem is narrated by a couple of eavesdropping angels, placing the reader in a position of divine surveillance. This diagram outlines three interpretations for the immortal. First, the Catholic Church leveling heresy accusations. Second, St. Peter conducting a celestial test of faith. Third, Lucifer tempting the subject into pride, accusing her of being infused with desire. The linguistic choices in the text support the framework of a church official. The vocabulary is clinical and authoritative, designed to mimic the weight of institutional power pressing down on the individual. The structural mastery of the poem relies on its ability to sustain all three of these interpretations simultaneously, without collapsing the narrative logic. We find the mechanics that hold these interpretations together in the structural and phonetic choices of the verse itself. Cantrall uses classical anaphora.
The deliberate repetition of "and she defends," followed immediately by "and infers." This constructs a strict legalistic rhythm, mimicking the back-and-forth cadence of a cross-examination. There is also a heavy reliance on sibilants. Look at the consonant patterns. Shadows chased in the night of a dreamer, a selfish subconscious. This hissing auditory mimicry serves a dual purpose. It replicates the hushed murmurs of angels observing from the rafters, while simultaneously evoking the sound of demonic whispering. The structure of this theological dialogue, a trial observed and recounted by a distinct chorus, mirrors the staging found in Elizabethan drama, where celestial or ghostly observers often frame the moral struggles of the protagonist. The poem's focus on the internal subconscious and desire aligns with the romantic interest in individual visionary experience. Meanwhile, the shadows and the immortal actors provide the heavy atmospheric pressure that is so typical of the Gothic tradition. Fusing Elizabethan theatricality, romantic isolation, and Gothic dread provides the exact mechanical tension required to achieve a sense of the sublime. We can trace the evolution of this thematic tension through paratextual evidence, the data surrounding the text itself. The author's edited history shows a clear progression. The poem was originally titled Waiting for Nothing, a framing focused on tragic masses missing the signs. The intermediate title, An Exception, shifted the narrative focus away from the masses and toward the solitary, isolating nature of the visionary. The final title, It Was More Than Just a Dream, definitively moves the thematic weight entirely onto the subject's unwavering internal conviction. We see this focus echoed in the peer commentary on the site, specifically regarding the metaphorical weight of the keys the subject perceives. The text leaves the nature of these keys ambiguous. They could be literal divine signs, deep spiritual truths, or entirely internal psychological triggers. Because of this ambiguity, her ability to interpret the signs functions simultaneously as a profound divine gift and a perilous psychological trap. This paratextual journey proves the poem was systematically refined over several years to strip away external context, prioritizing the subject's internal truth over external validation. Cantrall sets up an interrogation, but he refuses to let the interrogator win. By utilizing a highly specific historical anchor, the trial of Joan of Arc, and stripping it of its literal identifiers, the poem launches a universal exploration of faith, ego, and institutional power. True literary scholarship requires embracing this polysemy. Forcing a singular, reductive answer onto the identity of the immortal breaks the machinery of the text. The artistry of the poem is its capacity to maintain these competing realities, the church official, the holy saint, and the tempter, without forcing the reader to choose one over the other. The structural resolution arrives in the final lines through the use of an epistrophe, a repetition at the end of the phrase. The final line dismisses the entirety of the interrogation, the accusations of the tribunal, and the shadows of doubt through pure, unshakable internal alignment. The sublime power of "it was more than just a dream" lies in the quiet, definitive weight of its final assertion. This she knows.